Thundergrunt.
Welcome to Writers Blockbusters, the show that treats the final edit of a movie like the script. I'm one of your hosts, Bob Rose, and my Twitter handle is @ThundergruntBob, and the other guys are going to introduce themselves right now, starting with Jimmy.
I am Jimmy George. I am a screenwriter and script consultant. My Twitter handle is @JimmyRGeorge.
I am Jamie Nash, screenwriter, writer of Save the Cat Writes for TV, and last night's winner of the Turf Valley Trivia Contest, Pub Trivia. Check this out.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
That's right. I got all the movie answers right. There was one in the end that I thought was tricky. I mean, I thought it was easy, right? So it was, I'm trying to think of what this was. Liam Neeson starred as this heavy metal rock god in this 2010 motion picture, right? And this is the big one to win it all. This is the one you had to bet all your stuff on. And right away, I said Clash of the Titans, right? But then I started to debate, is it the sequel to Clash? I couldn't remember when Clash of the Titans came out. I was like, could this be a trick question as the final question? And could it be the sequel to Clash of the Titans?
Wrath of the Titans?
Yeah, wasn't that what it was called? Wrath of the Titans?
Wrath of the Titans, yeah.
So you had to wager money. But then it was one of these trivia games where then the guy plays a song that has a clue, you know? And it was London Calling by The Clash. So I got it right. We took the victory. We destroyed the competition. And we went home victors. And with that, @Jamie_Nash on Twitter.
I've rarely seen that competitive side in you, Jamie.
Yeah, I didn't know.
We were in the lead like the whole night. And it started to get like we grew and people were looking at us like, how are they getting these answers? And it grew and grew. And then by the end, I was like, there's no way we can, we can't lose this. We can't lose this. But the Clash of the Titans threw me for a loop a little bit.
It's like whenever, when I used to do a trivia with some movie friends and we would like show up and destroy all these families that were just there to have a good time, Like, oh, you gonna have a fun Saturday evening? No, it's gonna be not fun at all.
Let's go.
Yeah.
That was kind of what it was like last night, except our group really wasn't assembled that way, but we had like one person that was really good with music. We had a history major.
That's the way to go.
You had
the right mix.
You had the Avengers. Yeah.
The Avengers of trivia.
Yeah.
But I got to say, the one question that put us over the top, there was like this bonus round. It was like a lightning round of like biopics. And they described the real person. And then you had to list the biopics. Yeah. 5 for 5 on that, baby. 5 for 5. And we jumped. That's when we jumped to the lead. I think we were behind. And then we did that. And we were way in the lead. Like nobody else got. And I think it was one of these things where if you got even one wrong, you got 0. But if you got them all right, you got a ton of points. 5 for 5.
You plugged the podcast right after you won, right? I hope.
There were ones
probably
like
make everyone in there be like, "Fuck your podcast."
You want more of this knowledge?
That's right. It was like
they would be so mad that he won, they'd be like blocking it.
One of the questions was a walk hard question. I got that.
That's amazing.
Walk hard.
That's amazing. Anyway, this is not the trivia discussion day, but we're going to talk about a classic, the Ridley Scott masterpiece, 1979's Alien versus Predator Requiem. No, I'm kidding. Just Alien.
I thought it was Alf. I watched Alf.
The pilot episode of Alf.
Ridley Scott's Alf.
We should do the pilot episode of Alf just to see if we could wring anything out of it.
Sure.
But yeah, we're going to talk about Alien. So yeah, this is classic. So I think let's go around real quick and talk about what this movie means to each of us, like we always do.
Zoom table.
Yeah, the Zoom table. Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Go for it.
So I saw this. I remember I was 11 years old. It was 1991. And I'd seen plenty of horror movies before. My parents were these parents that let me see whatever. Like I saw RoboCop when I was 8. You know, like my parents were not deterred, but
Porkies.
My dad, no, but violence. Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, no sex, but violence, no big deal. But this was one of those movies, and my dad. I think I've mentioned on the podcast before that my dad and I have like such dramatically different like opinions on movies. My dad doesn't think people go to the movies to watch characters. Like we've gotten into arguments about this when I was like a teenager at the dinner table. He's like, yeah, I don't go to the movies to watch Indiana Jones. I go to watch the boulder and the action and I don't care who's in the story. And I'm like, that's not how it works. Like you don't realize why you're watching something then.
Does he love like Transformers and stuff? Like
yes.
Okay.
If the character work is weak and you didn't like it because of that, my dad does still enjoy the movie just as much as he would. You know, he's not a cinephile, and
right.
So it's really funny that I ended up being, so passionate about this.
It's your rebellion, man. That's your trauma.
No,
yeah.
I will show you. I will teach people how to write characters that you care about.
And one day you'll respect me, Dad.
But this is the one movie that he was really pumped to show me. He was like, are you ready? Brought out that VHS. Like, you're going to love this. And so, it was a nice father-son thing to experience this movie. So beyond that, I love this movie. I love the franchise. I like 1, 2, 3, and 4. I haven't seen the Alien versus Predator, but I loved the comic where it was actually the aliens versus Predator and they were the characters. I loved that comic when it was out, So anyway, that's pretty much it.
Cool. Jamie?
Yeah, I saw this movie with Jimmy's father in the theater a few years ago.
How old are you?
Yeah, he and I, we loved this movie. It was our favorite because it didn't have a lot of character. You didn't have to care about the characters. It was just kind of experience. No. So this movie is seminal to me, but it's a weird story about why it's seminal to me. I didn't see it in the theater. I was like 7 years old when it came out in the theater. And I was kind of a scared kid. So this would have terrified me to see it in the theater. But I was a scared kid that was very scare curious, I would say. Like I always was curious. I was always like wanting to see it, but I was a little scared. Like I didn't think I could endure it. And this particular one, my father actually, one of his friends at work gave him the graphic novel of this when I was 8 years old. And I ate that thing up. I read it over and over because I could kind of control that. So the graphic novel was huge to me. It's kind of like this kind of forgotten graphic novel. I think it was made by the people that did Heavy Metal. And it was like on glossy paper.
Oh, wow.
And
very cool.
I remember everybody's, and mine included, the way it was bound, it's split in the middle. And I think I eventually threw it away because it was split. But I've read it so many times it's split in the middle. So I knew this movie. I mean, and the graphic novel cut a lot of things out. Like it's funny because when I was watching it for this, I haven't seen this movie that many times. But when I was watching it for this, I was picking up like the differences between the graphic novel that I remember in the movie, some of the small things they cut. But anyway, so that was a huge influence on me, this comic book, because it was scary and bloody, and it had the chest. It almost made the chest burster scene seem scarier because I was plugging it all in my mind. Like it showed all this blood and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to see that in the theater. So I saw Aliens in the theater because by then I was like a kid that could go see movies by themselves or with my friends. So Aliens, I remember I wrote a blog about this, was one of the most visceral movie experiences I ever remember. Like I remember the tension in the movie theater. and just how scary it was and how intense it was and how fun it was. Like it was one of the best times I ever had in the movie theater was Aliens. But a lot of the things from Alien they are actually kind of ripped off in James Cameron's Alien. Like they're as much as Aliens is my favorite and one of my favorite movies of all times. The more I watch Alien, I realize how much even things like that we'll get into, like the motion detector kind of and stuff like that. Like James Cameron kind of advanced certain techniques and stuff the one movie and just blew them up even bigger.
He did change the genre, which
he changed the genre.
He copied it, but it didn't. That doesn't bother me.
Yeah, but I found Alien super intense too. It's just not as dread inducing as this movie is. So I saw Alien after I saw Aliens, and honestly, I don't remember even when I saw it. Like that's how, because the comic book I had, Aliens was one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. I just love it. I've seen it over and over and over. And then at some point I saw Alien after and appreciated it, but it's kind of a different movie for me for that reason. I appreciate it more and more, probably as I've watched it in the last few years than maybe I even did back then. Cool. That's my long Alien story.
Yeah, I'll try to keep mine short. To go with Jimmy's familia, relationship to the movie. My parents, you guys, I might have said this on the podcast before, but I was not raised by cinephiles. My parents were not into movies. My dad was only into comedies, which I think says a lot about who I am. I saw Spaceballs before I saw Alien. I think I saw Spaceballs. And my first exposure to what Alien, I didn't even get the joke when John Hurt literally says "not again." To me, I was just like, "Oh, that happened to that guy before." It was the great movie ride in Orlando, in Disney in Orlando. If you guys, I don't even know if you remember that ride.
I remember it. The Nostromo. There's this voiceover guy that comes on.
Yeah,
the Nostromo.
There's an Alien section of that ride, and it has a Ripley shooting up at an alien that's coming out of the ceiling dripping a bunch of slime. And I remember after my parents took us there with my grandparents for some kind of anniversary, and I was like, what is that? I need to know what that is. And when we got home, I made my mom rent Alien because I wanted to see it. And then since then I've been completely in love with them. I actually love basically every Alien movie, even the bad ones. None of them are boring to watch for me. But so my relationship to this movie is me coming a little bit later and me coming after pop culture hit it. Like I said, I saw John Hurt have something burst out of his chest in Spaceballs before I saw Alien. So you know what I mean? I came to this late, and as an adult, I totally see it now. I saw the director's cut in theaters 4 times. Remember when they released it?
Yeah.
I totally took advantage of that because I was like, you know what? I missed the whole
see it on the big screen.
Right. I missed the train on the original, so I just was like, I'm gonna pile drive this one into me. So I did come late to it, but I love it. Oh, obviously.
The great movie ride. It had this little. I think I love when they put stupid stunts in their things. It had that. The guy who was driving the train, giving you the tour, he gets involved in this Indiana Jones set piece thing where he disappears, and then this gangster guy comes out. Depending on sometimes it's a gangster, I think sometimes it's a cowboy. And he takes over the train, and he's the one that drives into the alien ride by accident. He's like, "What is this place?" And he's looking around.
Yeah. No, I recommend anyone who's interested in that go on YouTube. There's camcorder ride through the great movie ride, and it's and it was made at a time where it's representing all the movies that of our age.
Yeah, they have a big Wizard of Oz set.
Wizard of Oz. There's diehards in there.
Casablanca.
Alien,
they have the real plane from Casablanca.
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff.
Really,
it was
great.
Cool.
It was a great ride.
I was disappointed when they tore it down. I used to always go.
But there's walkthroughs of it or ride throughs of it.
I didn't know. Oh, yeah. I see.
Yeah,
okay.
So you can watch somebody hold a camcorder.
I thought you meant you could walk through the old stuff. I was
no. No, but I've watched that a few times since. I've watched people drive through it. Anyway, the great movie ride aside, Jamie,
yes,
who wrote this shit?
Who wrote this shit? Sponsored by Save the Cat. Right, Steve. No. So Daniel O'Bannon gets the sole screenplay credit from this thing. Ronald Shushet gets a story by. Walter Hill also worked on the screenplay. And historically, or I should say, it's kind of infamously, that I think the idea was that they were trying to get Dan O'Bannon's credit wiped away, but Dan O'Bannon's credits stayed. And the Walter Hill drafts actually are some good screenwriting samples to look at if you want to look. Very white space, kind of elegantly written. If you can find the Walter, and they're out there, I mean, you can find it. Look for the Walter Hill one as opposed to Dan O'Bannon's original Star Beast. Is that what it was called or something?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Daniel O'Bannon's is fine, and it's most of the story, but the Walter Hill ones are really cool stylistically to check out.
Yeah, the action stacking he does. That's the first time I saw action stacking, which is like a presentation style that, is very specific to him. That you see a lot now.
Yeah, I've used it as samples to classes and stuff. Like, here's Alien. It's really cool.
We got to just do a Walter Hill movie in the future.
Yes.
I don't know which one, but eventually. How much?
The Warriors.
What kind of money did this make? I think I'm interested. Jimmy, you said you were interested.
Yeah, I want to know.
I have no clue how successful Alien was.
Right. So you want to take this trivia night at the pub.
Right.
What was the box office, the worldwide box office for Alien? I think you'll figure it out. I think your instinct will be right.
In 1979?
1979. What do you think? Alien.
Like $80 million?
I was gonna go 65, but maybe Jimmy's more optimistic.
Okay, so Jimmy's closer. If this were Price is Right, though, you have to go over or whatever. So the U.S. box office was 81 million. So
I was huge. So close.
You're so close. Yeah.
The world box office, it was only 106. There's not a huge difference back in 1979 between the world and the U.S. But $106 million, a lot of money for back then.
Yeah,
just to,
holy shit.
Just to give it a little taste. 1979. Who knows what the 1979 number one movie is, which we'll probably one day do on this podcast if we last long enough. Anybody know? 1979? Any ideas?
No.
Okay.
I mean, it's
Shining was 1980, right?
You would have failed. You would have failed at trivia night.
The Exorcist. What was The Exorcist?
Now, one of Bob's favorites of all time, a 1970s movies. One of Bob's favorites of all times, and I'm talking about Moonraker. No, I'm talking about Superman.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Same year. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that made, and this is domestic. I brought up the domestic numbers.
How
that made 92, 93.
I know.
That's because we were talking about how we hadn't done too many 70s movies. And when I saw this list, I was like, there's a couple on here that we may end up with one day. Believe it or not, this one shocks me. The Amityville Horror is the number 2 movie of 1970.
Whoa.
$86 million. And look what it beat. Rocky 2, Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Wow.
Alien clocks in at number 5. Damn. Apocalypse Now is number 6. 10 is number 7. The Jerk is number 8. Moonraker is number 9. Meatballs, Escape from Alcatraz, and then there's some other ones down the list. 1941.
I just watched Escape from Alcatraz.
Wow, 1941's on there.
Yeah, and I have to say, as a kid, this is a bit, and every year from the 70s to early 80s is like a huge year for me. But there are a couple that really pop for me because I remember seeing Star Trek the Motion Picture, and while it was kind of boring when I saw it, and I know there's a new cut. I was blown away.
Cut is my favorite Star Trek movie.
I need to rewatch it.
Kidding. I'm just a big fan of it.
The movie blew me away as a kid, like seeing, because I was a Star Trek kid. We had to watch, and Rocky 2 was my first Rocky movie. And I saw that first before I saw Rocky, kind of like I did Aliens to Alien. And that was a huge movie for me. But 10 and The Jerk, I cannot tell you how huge The Jerk was, like just among like kids. You know what I mean? Like just
That's it's a quote on the schoolyard.
It's quotable.
Yeah.
And, like it's
Quote
my
on the
wife.
schoolyard.
My wife says that was her family's favorite movie, like of all time to this day. Like she loves Steve Martin. So The Jerk and Moonraker was the first James Bond movie I saw in the theater. So anyway, huge.
Man, so yeah, this list for you.
Yeah, I
Huge
mean,
one.
like,
Huge one.
I feel like a lot of times when we talk about old stuff, it's hard to translate just how popular things were.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the way that the pop culture worked back then, too.
Yeah, you didn't have
Steve Martin was
TikTok.
like a living god back then. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean, I cannot, because The Jerk's kind of forgotten in just how impactful it was. And 10 is another one. I didn't see 10, but 10 was a huge movie. I mean, Bo Derek, Dudley Moore. I mean, it was huge. Kind of forgotten, and most
even in
kids
the 90s,
today wouldn't think about
when
it.
she was in Tommy Boy, I remember my dad telling me who she was, and I was like, I never even heard of 10.
Yeah.
It was like
huge,
yeah.
huge movie. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't even, it's kind of amazing to me when I think back how forgotten it was, but how it was everywhere back then, those two movies.
Well-
but anyway, one day, Elliot.
Nobody even likes Avatar anymore. It happens. You can have a huge movie that just completely disappears from the popular eye,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
until James Cameron makes it.
Speaking of aliens.
yeah, I know. Well, it's like
Yeah.
relevant, sort of, right?
Yeah, it absolutely is.
Yeah. Well, let's get
Yeah.
into it. Let's get into Alien.
20 minutes in.
Yeah. Unless you want to talk about trivia some more.
Yeah,
No,
let's
we're
talk about-
we're about to do some trivia with
Let's do
this
some-
first talking point.
Let's
Oh,
do
yeah,
the
that's right.
trivia. Premise with a new skin for 500.
All right. So I thought since this is the inception of this movie was, didn't they pitch it to the studio as Jaws in space, guys? That's
Yep.
that's a fact.
That's
right?
like
Yes,
an
that's a
infamous
fact.
Yeah.
That's a fact.
Yes.
It's
Okay.
in-
So
It's in Dan O'Bannon's book, in fact. He mentions Charles Wilson. Yeah.
which we're going to reference later. So what perfect timing to talk about this exercise of how to come up with new stories that bring a fresh take to an existing genre or a fresh take to a movie that was very successful. So yeah, Jaws with a space skin is Alien. So I thought I'd go down a list and quiz you guys. Here we go with more trivia. This is the trivia episode.
Man,
And
Jamie's
give you
gonna
some-
win.
give you a bunch of premise with a new skins, and we can kind of talk about how that's instructive for screenwriting and for idea generation. It's a great exercise. Okay, first we're gonna go with Jaws with a new skins. Okay, Jaws with a found footage skin.
Open water.
Open water. Jaws with a crocodile skin.
Lake Placid.
Like
I was even thinking of that other one that just came out, but Lake Placid is closer.
no. I know what you're talking
Crawl?
about. Crawl.
Crawl, which is awesome.
I dug Crawl. Yeah.
Yeah, love Crawl. Jaws in the desert.
Tremors.
Tremors.
I said the syllable first.
Jaws
Dude.
with a Jaws with a bear skin and a wood skin.
The Edge.
The Edge did come later, and that is one, but I was going with Grizzly.
Okay, Grizzly. Sure.
Jaws with a killer whale skin.
Orca.
Yes. And we'll take it even further. Sci-fi, this has been a huge brand for them. So Jaws with a disaster movie skin.
Oh, Sharknado.
Sharknado.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. I got you.
Jaws with a supernatural skin.
Ghost Shark.
Ghost Shark.
Yeah.
Are we really doing this? Okay.
Okay. Franchises do this within their own.
You didn't go with
Within their
dinosaur
own-
skin? We did Jurassic Park? Okay.
Jaws with the dinosaurs. Yeah, there
I
you
was
go.
gonna say Jurassic Park. Okay.
Okay.
In a weird
Right.
sort of way, though, I would say those last two you did are more like disaster movie with a shark skin. opposed to the
see? Well,
'Cause
and that's
I think the engine of those movies, not that I'm really just kind of
No,
joking,
but
in
that's-
some
no,
ways
that's-
it's true. Yeah.
that's the good note. Yeah. So okay, here's some alien ones. Alien with a serial killer subgenre.
Alien with the serial killer
Sunshine?
subgenre. Halloween. Not
Pitch Black.
Pitch Black.
Oh,
okay.
God.
They get a distress signal. They go to pick it up. The alien that's there that starts killing everybody is a serial killer.
Okay.
Okay.
I got it.
All right, but
Um,
Sunshine kind of works too. I just
That
wanna say
works too. Yeah. Alien in the jungle.
Predator.
Predator. And the original Predator design was an alien looking, like it looked just like the alien, except it was red.
The Van Damme lobster, right? Yeah.
Alien with a haunted house skin. Come on, guys. The listeners are like,
I didn't know. I wasn't. Dude, I was not prepared for a trivia contest.
It's just like I'm like it's not The Conjuring.
Alien with a haunted house skin. I'm sorry. Oh man, I'm gonna be mad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be mad.
Event Horizon.
I'm thinking actual haunted.
Yeah, the sci-fi aspect. I'm not sure that threw me off. Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, and they even the Alien franchise even does this within its own franchise. Go ahead.
I see what happened. I was still thinking of Jaws, and you switched to Alien. I got
switched to Alien.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I got
Alien with a military skin and an action genre skin.
Aliens.
Aliens. Yeah. They swapped it from truckers to military, and they swapped it from horror, even though there's still horror inherent to it, to action. It's really an action movie. This one is not an action. So you can take this simple exercise and you can come up with completely different movies that are all unique, but they're still using the DNA of the original thing that you're inspired by.
So I watched this for the show, and I logged it on my Letterboxd because I do that. I don't actually write reviews on Letterboxd, but I did see the top one, which was somebody going, "This is just a slasher in space," and I was like, and it was like not a great review, like it was a mediocre review, and I'm like, yeah,
that's why it's awesome. That was
dude.
That was the point.
Yeah, I don't know what the guy thought it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
like that's what it is.
It's funny because. So a lot of people are turned off by this, right? They're like, it's a ripoff, quote unquote. But to me, as we talked about in the Pig episode, which is John Wick with a pacifist in a Portland culinary location, culinary world location, like that's all of these movies exist because of this exercise, because someone's like, let's do Jaws with a space skin, Mm-hmm. So Jamie, you're the first person to like kind of articulate this for me, like, it's this meets that, sure, but there it goes further than that, like by doing John. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
No, when I taught Dan O'Bannon how to do this, he was blown away.
You and Jimmy's father taught Dan O'Bannon.
But you use this, right, Jamie? I use this.
All the time. All the time.
Use this exercise to come up with ideas. Yeah.
I have a ton of exercises that just kind of force me to think of these things. Like, like I'll have I've probably talked about this on the show before, but I even have this spreadsheet exercise that when I really need to come up with ideas for some reason, I'll write on the top of the spreadsheet, like 10 movie ideas, and on the side, 10 movie ideas. And then the middle blocks, the intersections. I'll write the kind of my first instinct. Like it's like an improv game I play, and it's just like, okay, what's Alien meets Pretty Woman? And I'll be like, I don't know.
The two movies that exemplify this in my own brain are the two movies that I felt used it in their actual marketing, which is Die Hard and The Matrix. Like other movies started to be compared to Die Hard, and then other movies started to be like, it's Matrix meets, like that was on the poster. It's Matrix meets whatever, like Speed a little bit too. I remember that a lot of.
We did this exercise in another episode where we did those very examples.
Those are the movies that they use the premise to advertise other movies with the premise.
They're embracing it.
Yeah,
they're embracing this
totally
exercise.
Embrace it.
Yeah.
And there's really a few ways you can do it. You could steal whatever you want from either one, like when you're crossing two things.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just steal the location or the genre. Sometimes you steal the hero. Sometimes you steal the concept. Sometimes there's all kinds of things.
It's just like the cinematography, even like
Yeah. When you could do the tone,
it's vibe.
The vibe.
Yeah, it's just vibe.
So it's really kind of it's really up to you to pick like what you're kind of flipping. I always say you're flipping the bits of it. Like oh, okay, well it's Alien, but I'm going to set it in the Wild West, or whatever, and you're flipping the bit of whatever thing it is. So.
But I encourage this. I don't think this is a bad thing. I think this is how the genre grows and evolves. To ignore that Jaws is influencing all these things is a joke. Like
to be dismissive of this is to not understand movies.
Yeah.
Well,
in my opinion.
I also say at the end of the day, you're going to write what you want to write. Like nobody's going to force you to write Sharknado. If you don't like Sharknado, you won't write that one. You'll come up with something else. So you'll come up with one you like.
Sharknado.
Yeah.
But this is how you get to Sharknado, and you get to a marketable, unique thing that a certain audience will enjoy. So
one of my pet peeves was always that church sign meme that says, if you ever think that you come up with bad ideas, just remember somebody pitched Sharknado once or something. I'm like, are you kidding me? That was a big franchise. You people wish you could come up with Sharknado.
It was like a cultural moment. Like, exactly. It doesn't matter that it's dumb.
Sharknado.
People watch Sharknado. There was a Mondo poster of Sharknado.
Yeah.
It was a moment. You can stop.
It was
5 of them.
There's 5.
Anyway, so premise with a new skin is super, super impactful and a great exercise.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's something we've covered well and good, because the movies that we tend to do on the show are premise with a new skin. Right?
Yep.
And the next one, and we've covered before, Monster in the House. I feel like this is like Jamie's my earliest
wheelhouse.
memory of this is Jamie Nash saying it. So Jamie, what is Monster in the House?
Can you just get the audio from another episode?
Yeah, I'll just edit it in. You don't have to.
Okay.
I don't want you to use any energy.
Well, the funny thing about this, and now I'm rapidly. So in Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, Monster in the House is a Blake Snyder term from Save the Cat, from his genres. Genres are story patterns. When we talk about story patterns, he has several of them, like Golden Fleece, which is like trying to win a trophy, award, something like that, following a road, going on a quest. He has ones like Buddy Love, which are either romances or relationship movies. And one of his is called Monster in the House, which is for a lot of the horror movies, but it doesn't have to be a horror movie. Like I always point out, something like What About Bob could be or Cable Guy could be a Monster in the House. So
amazing.
The book that he uses, in Save the Cat Goes to the Movies, his second book, he breaks down Alien, and this is where he kind of explores some, like how to use the genres or breaks them down. And he calls this one a pure monster movie. He has different subgenres of the various monsters in the house. And he lists its cousins, and I think this kind of speaks to the skin thing. Listen to some of these: as Jaws, Tremors, Jurassic Park, Anaconda, Deep Blue Sea, Godzilla, Independence Day, Men in Black. I'm not sure about that one.
I guess
the plot. I guess he's doing the plot like the monster is coming to attack there.
Monsters in the house's Earth. Yeah.
And Lake Placid. I skipped
Lake Placid.
And the thing. the thing is actually one that Dan O'Bannon said was an inspiration. The original.
Sure.
It came from outer space, or is that what it was called? It came from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, Monster in the House. It has 3 elements. It has a sin, a house, and a monster. They're the main 3 elements that to qualify it. So the sin brings about the monster. And in this case, I'd say the sin was corporate greed. I think he might even list it as such or something along those lines.
Pretty much. I agree with you.
Be corporate greed, or even arguably trusting AI or something?
I was going to say even more specifically over exploitation of Mother Nature, because they're trying to take this thing that exists in nature, even though it's not on our world, it's in another world, and they're trying to exploit it.
I feel like that's more Aliens, than Alien, but yeah. That feels more like the sequel.
In some ways, I think
maybe it's painting my.
As I flip through Blake's book, I mean, he doesn't. I'm sure it's here somewhere, but I'm trying to read it after the fact.
He says this. I wrote it down. What he said. It's one sentence at the end. He says the company knew the alien was a killer, but sent the crew to achieve it because of its value. That's okay. He defines the sin. So his is sort of in line with me, but then his theme. We'll talk about his theme when we get to the arc. Is kind of different. Yeah. And I don't like it.
I don't like his theme either. But usually the sin and the theme kind of go hand in hand sometimes. But then in a movie like Poltergeist, where they built the houses but took away the gravestones, they didn't move the bodies. I don't know if that's the theme of Poltergeist or not, but it probably relates. I don't know, because usually the theme's on a personal level, but this sin isn't Ripley's sin,
No, not at all.
or any of the crew. They're kind
And
of
a lot of times the final girls, a lot of times the final character, like Nancy did not commit the sin in Nightmare on Elm Street. Her parents did. A lot of times people are dealing with the fallout of something somebody else did,
Right, but I like that also, like you said, Jamie, like if it was like a Jason movie, all the kids around the final girl committed the sin of doing drugs. And
yeah,
having sex,
exactly. Yeah.
So they get paid for it. This crew did none of that.
Right.
This crew is not guilty of anything.
They're kind of innocent. They're lambs to the slaughter in some ways. Yeah. They're the ones that are almost sinned against in some ways.
They are. Yeah.
So, and that's okay. That can be a part of
we're not
Monster
saying it's
in the
bad.
House.
It's just
No, it's part of the DNA of a monster in the house. It could be that way, or it could be the hero that commits the sin. But sin brings about the evil is kind of the idea. There's something deserved about this, something that balances in the universe, so to speak. But so then the other elements are the house. In this case, it's simple. I think it's the spaceship. Yeah. And then the monster, of course, is simple as well. And then in this case, there's one other thing that is thrown in there we talk about a lot called the half man. And the half man is usually like a quint character. It's somebody that has some knowledge of the monster or the evil or something that
Dr. Loomis,
something like that. And they're called half man because sometimes
they've experienced the monster. They know about it, right?
Exactly. They've been damaged by the evil.
And this would that be Ian Holm?
It's definitely Ash. I think it's unconventional in that way because Ash is helping the monster instead of helping them destroy the monster. And I like that. Like usually when we've broken down one horror movie after another that uses all of these and uses a half man, and Candyman, the reboot was like this as well. The half man and Candyman was actually helping Candyman and helping bring about the monster. So this is like an unconventional in that way. I do think it's Ash.
So the moral of the half man doesn't matter, right? It's just the fact that it is the character that knows. Absolutely. It has the knowledge.
There is a character that has the knowledge, and that's how the audience learns more.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that he has insider knowledge of kind of the greed of the company and the master plan and stuff also.
It's so unconventional.
They're also, society is also, the company is also the villain here. There's two villains.
Also, be creative. The half man here isn't even a man.
I know, it's awesome.
So he's essentially a computer.
He's half a man.
Half milkman.
Half cop. All cop. I can't
half
remember.
A milkman.
Half a milkman. Yeah.
Half man. Right.
So
half machine cop. Sorry. I fix your RoboCop tagline.
Exactly. if we ever do Aliens, it's interesting. We don't have to talk about this, but is Ripley the half man in Aliens in some ways?
Yeah.
Or is it Newt?
Yeah.
Is it Newt or is it Ripley?
Newt.
It's probably Newt.
It's probably Newt. It's probably Newt for the situation, but Ripley definitely has half man qualities.
Yes.
She totally fought one.
It's almost like if you made Halloween 2 and you made it Donald Pleasance's movie, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like he was the guy going back in.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Which would kind of be a cool idea for a movie.
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't do that. It would change the genre, I guess.
A CGI Donald Pleasance. Come on.
Exactly. Jack Black as Loomis.
Dude, yes. I'd watch that.
That's our pitch. So anyway, that's Monster in the House. So it's very instructive to kind of know those things, you figure those things out before you start writing your horror movie, especially the house and the monster. I mean, that's really important. But the sin is the extra credit, I think, or the extra something Blake Snyder added in his book. And the half man gives you guidance as well.
Yep.
That's good. Speaking of horror, you feel like, do we need to talk about that, or do we just cover
I would like to talk about the three types of horror, Jamie, if you want to refresh it. And then
the three types are another one we always hit when we do our horror movies. It's like our go-to is, and it kind of comes from the Stephen King. There's a Stephen King quote that we're kind of paraphrasing here.
Danse macabre.
And I'm always having to remember it because I kind of rephrase it in my own words. But there's really three kinds of horror. There is there's dread, which I call it dread. He calls it like terror.
Terror, yeah.
He splits like terror and horror as the same thing, and to me they're too synonymous. So I always split it to dread just because it helps.
Yeah.
My brain.
We should tweak it to our Stephen King inspired version of this definition.
Stephen King asked, because I fixed it for him. I fixed it for him in post.
You made it cleaner.
He needed your help too, because
he needed my help.
Yeah, Stephen King, he don't know what the hell he's
That's
doing.
why his last couple of books got better, because he's been listening to the podcast.
And he read Save the Cat Rights for TV. Right?
He was like, "Oh,
yeah, that was the game changer for Mr. King."
He was like, "Oh, that's the difference between terror and horror."
Thanks, Jamie Nash.
Exactly. So dread is one of them. Horror is the other one, or
that's the jump scare.
That's the jump scare. That's something that
the Conjuring jump scares.
So dread is like winding the tension. Horror is releasing it. It's that thing that goes bam, and it gets you and shocks you, and you have to release all your tension at once. And then last but not least, he says, "I'm not proud. Otherwise I'll go for the gross out," which is his third. And this movie has all three and does a great job, especially. I mean, it does a great job in all three.
All three,
a phenomenal job in all three.
Go for it. It mixes them what. Since we've been doing this exercise, it's made me realize one day I have to come up with a good news, bad news that's this. Because I've noticed when we're talking about this particular talking point, there seem to be like notes on a horror piano, like dun dun dun. Like the alien egg opening is dread, then gross out as it's all slimy and gross, then dread again as what's inside there, then a jump scare. They kind of use those like back to back to back and like mix them up, like A, B, C, and then C, B, A, and then C, C, A. So like the face hugger loose in the infirmary is dread, then a jump scare when it falls down on her, then a gross out when they're poking it and it's all like gross and slimy and weird. And the newborn alien bursting out of his chest is dread. What the fuck is going on? We're all like, oh my God. And then gross out as it like splats, and then it's a jump scare as the alien jumps out. So it uses these things. And even like the Dallas and the air shaft, there's dread because we can't find the alien, but we know he's there. And then there's gross out because he picks up the slime and he knows that the alien is near. And then there's dread again with the tracking device. And then there's a jump scare when the alien jumps onto him. So it's not just that they're using one, they're using all three of them combined in unique ways and different in every scene, but they all have all three of them in like every one of the horror scenes. So it's very interesting. I think it's extremely easy to do. Like if you just like have a blank sheet, you're like, okay, I got my three. What do I do here in this horror scene? I need to pop in some dread. I'm missing some gross out. I'm missing a jump scare. You know what I mean? I think you can also do that.
I mean, like the gross out is just like embedded into the creature design.
Oh,
It's the slime coming out of its mouth. It covers gross out even when there's no gore.
Yeah.
Like the alien is gross out itself.
Yes.
Incarnate.
Yeah. The interesting thing about him are the dread is almost participatory with the audience. It's letting the audience, when you think about the Blair Witch Project or something where you don't see anything, you just hear it. So you're playing like this movie in your mind. So a lot of dread is playing. It's kind of inspiration. It's giving you like inspiration to play a horror movie in your mind. And then the other two are actually they're physical reactions, or they cause physical reactions. So much so that they sort of erase the slate of dread in your mind. So once you hit those, you have to start building dread back up again. So it's also a problem with movies that you see have too many jump scares or too many, they're pounding that drum too many times. Sometimes they can take away from the dread a little bit. Sometimes they can hurt the dread.
Yeah.
They're kind of a crying wolf, right?
Yeah, they keep hitting it. They don't give you time to kind of have that imaginary movie. They keep showing you stuff. They're like, here it is, here's another one, or something like that.
Well, to move on, I don't know if you guys know this, but our cat is named Ripley. And the reason our cat is named Ripley is because of a massive respect for the character of Ripley, who is one of the greatest heroes in cinema history. So let's talk about. They like that transition. Let's talk about Ripley as a hero.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you guys?
Definitely one of the greats, right? I mean,
I did. Before we get into the arc, if you want, I did the rooting resume based on Jamie's book. I love when I'm always bringing Jamie's words onto the table, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I wrote that."
Next time, don't tell him, and just see if he notices.
He won't even notice.
I probably wouldn't. I honestly, I'd remember reading resume, but I do have to look up a lot of the things. Like when I'm talking to somebody, I'm like, yeah, let me go look them up because I don't remember.
Yeah, do you want to set up your rooting resume, and then I'll go into it with Ripley?
Sure. Well, Save the Cat's based on that whole premise that a character can be a jerk, but if they save the cat, you'll like them. And I think that's fine, but I think there's other ways to do it. I think it's important that we root for a character, and there's a lot of ways to root for a character. And a lot of them have to do with kind of being underdogs, the world crapping on them, being a little bit invisible, things like that. And there's a whole bunch. There's some of them are just being super cool or being the best at something or being funny or being Bill Murray or something like that. So
being Bill Murray is usually sometimes just that's all you need.
Yeah. So anyway,
you could argue being Sigourney Weaver is also really
all you need. Yeah.
Being a movie star, a good movie star that people love.
Yeah. But so Jamie, you in the book break it down into 8 different categories of rooting techniques, and then they all have little expansions on them. So I'm going to go down each category and we'll see how Ripley represents these things and why there's so much rooting interest and what makes her such a great character that we root for.
This was a trivia question last night, by the way. It was like, what are the 8 categories of Jamie Nash's Save the Cat?
Rooting resume.
I was like, I got this one.
Okay. They're underdogs. In this category, I checked 2 out of 6. I checked the world treats them unjustly. Like so many people on the ship are disrespecting her. So she immediately is an underdog in that way. They're Rodney Dangerfields. They get no respect. Those two go hand in hand. In the second category, you call they care about something or someone. A family, which I would consider the coworkers, like this story's equivalent of her family. She definitely cares about her family. Yeah, the rules. A cat, which they save.
Save the cat.
So there's two in that category. The third category is they try very hard to make their lives better. I mean, that's the whole movie. The fourth one, you have their fun. I checked 1 out of 5 here, which is like some characters just bring the hotness even in their attitude. And I think her attitude is very attractive. Like she's smart. She knows better than anybody else in the story. And that makes her interesting to watch.
Yeah.
5, we know their struggle. I checked 2 out of 4 here. They have a secret pain. I think when she's alone for a moment with Mother and learns the secret, we get that moment where like she knows something no one else in the story knows, and it's very we connect with her in probably like the deepest way we have up to that moment. And then I checked they're in mourning. I mean, as soon as people start dying, everybody in the story is in mourning, which makes them easy to root for. Number 6. This is the category, Jamie, that I checked 7 out of 9 you have here. So this is like, we wish we were more like them is the category. And like, listen to all the ones: self-sacrificing, resourceful, loyal, smartest person in the room, overcomes their fears, never gives up, cuts through the BS, lives by an hour. She checks like 8 out of the 9 there. Like, those are all awesome things. And they're all like, I feel like Ripley does every one of those things. But
she is just like right. Like, she's so hardcore right in this movie.
Yes.
That's like, I know I'm not trying to just boil it all down, but like this movie is like, you should have just listened to her.
Just listen at the beginning.
She was right the whole time.
Yeah. They're just like us. They share common mundane problems. This one made me think, and it was interesting. I hadn't really thought about this. It's kind of veering off to the side, but there's a technique I call mundane magic. where you take fantastical elements and you paint them with like boring things and they become special and unique to the movie. And that cryo sleep, I mean, that is mundane magic right there. And that is like an everyday problem. Like everybody's got to sleep, but this movie shows us the cryo sleep, and it's like unique to this movie. I mean, I wonder if they've ever showed that in a movie before this movie.
Planet
this
of the
is
Apes, right?
Yeah, that probably predates this by a lot. Yeah.
It's 60s, so yeah.
Oh yeah. Number 8, they're the best at something. They have talents. I think just she's the best at making smart choices. Right? Like she's making all the right decisions for the rest of the movie. So there you go. That is a lot of rooting resume that Ripley fills out, and I feel like that's why we like her so much. Good job with that book, Jamie.
Yes.
That's available on Amazon still, right? Just making sure.
If you want to create your own rooting resume.
Had to get that plug in there, dude.
Any regular listener probably like hates your book by now.
Holy shit. Shut
we
up.
get it. The joke isn't even funny. So the guy who wrote this movie, we talked about him, Dan O'Bannon, right? He also wrote a book that you guys have mentioned.
Wait, I want to backtrack. We're skipping over the big discussion.
Oh, the big one.
Yeah,
okay,
go ahead. Go ahead.
It's my fault. Go ahead. Arc.
The arc.
I'm sorry, I skipped over.
No worries. No worries.
Jesus, Bob.
Look.
Can't even read an outline like he's paid to do.
Yeah. Paid.
Have to get another.
That's a joke right there.
I don't have.
We're gonna have to hire another outline reader to facilitate the discussion.
Jamie, you were the one who wanted to talk about this, right?
Yeah,
I did. So this came up in a conversation I had with somebody else the other day, and they said, I was talking about adding an arc to a story, and they were saying, what's Ripley's arc? They were saying, do you really need an arc? And they were like, what's Ripley's arc? And I was like, I don't know. Is there one seated in there? I couldn't remember. So one of the main reasons I wanted to rewatch this movie was to see if I missed one, but I couldn't really think of one off the top of my head for Ripley. And honestly, when I watched the movie, I'm not sure there is an arc, but I'm interested in what you think. If there's
Bob, what do you think?
I don't think she has one. I've talked about this on the show before. I think she has a knowledge arc, and she has an experience arc. She does not have a character arc. She is the same person with the same morals and values that she is at the beginning and the end. She was right, so she didn't need to deal with her decisions or anything. She knows she was right, just like she knew she was right at the beginning.
And I have some theories about this too.
Bob,
I have some theories about this.
I think that I agree with you, but I'm gonna put some counterpoints up here.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna put some potential ones.
Okay.
I went through, and then I'm also gonna say what Blake says, and I disagree with what Blake says, just to tease it.
I have a feeling it's gonna be about who she trusts is the arc.
Yeah. Well, okay. So David S. Freeman, he has a script. He has a seminar that I went to like 20 years ago, and now he's in India running like 20th Century Fox in India, which good for him. They have billions of viewers, and it's a huge industry over there. But it's not really available anywhere, the material that I learned in this seminar. So he had a list that he taught of 40 types of character arcs. And I use it often for my own stuff, and I use it to help clients like kind of fine tune a story where they want a character arc, but they don't know what to do. He has 2 in here that I think possibly track, but then I have counterpoints that are basically what you just said, Bob.
Okay.
So the number one is this one is follower to leader. And he lists this as the woman versus society conflict. And I do think that this is a woman versus society. Like the company is the face of societal ill.
This is also the ultimate listen to women movie. Like
right.
No one wanted to listen to her, and they all died.
Except the other woman on the crew wanted to do the same thing that Ripley did. But she was following the company's protocol. But my counterpoint to that is she behaved like a leader from the start. She was always being a leader, and the company protocol that she was trying to follow would have saved them from if Ash hadn't broken the company protocol, and he's, you know, the secret face of the company, if they had followed the company protocol and kept him out of the ship, it would have been fine. So I don't know. I don't know if the follower to leader tracks.
If she was Tom Skerritt at the beginning of the movie, if she was in that role, would the movie have happened as it did? That's a question. I'm just asking.
Yeah, because if she was out there, you mean she wouldn't have let him come in. She was out with him. Right. Yes.
If she took her responsibility as captain and was out there, she would have never brought him near the ship to let Ash let him in. So it wouldn't even have been a movie.
So yeah. You know? So okay. So
Ash had to do it under a guise of something. Yeah. Right.
Right. So that one doesn't really, even though it feels like it could work. Go ahead, Jamie.
Weird thing too. In movie logic, usually she's the wrong one and the guy who saves the person's the right one in movie logic. You know what I mean? Usually we learn not to blindly follow orders, but in this, you could argue that the thing is blindly follow orders, except for the fact that the orders got the orders in the situation corrupt. In the beginning. Yeah. So it's a big mix and weird jumble.
And it's a testament to the movie too. Like, you still love Tom Skerritt's character.
Yeah.
You know, like
he wants to help him.
He's not unjust at all.
It's what we didn't really go. We're not going into it in this episode, but it's quite a dilemma, right? There's meaningful choices they're made by all three of them.
Life, you know,
and then Ash makes a meaningful choice to break the rules, and Ripley makes a meaningful choice to stay to the rules. It's like a great example of meaningful choice in that face of dilemma. Go ahead, Jamie. What were you going to say?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and you have some more of these though, right? Because I'll save what I'm going to say.
I do.
Have a theory. I have a theory.
I
do. But I'll wait to hear some more of yours. Yeah.
And when I found this one on this list, I had kind of forgotten, because Bob, this is an arc you talk about a lot on this show, which is, you know, the people learning things. This guy has that as an actual character arc. Have eyes open to the dark side of the world. And he also lists this as a woman versus society, man-woman versus society conflict, you know. And I would say my counterpoint to that is she never trusted Ash. She's questioning Ash's motives from the start. Like, there's even a whole scene about her saying, like, who is Ash? Where did he come from? Do you trust him? I don't. So that in the face of that suggested arc that she has her dies, it feels like she already knows that this could be happening. Like they don't vocalize her suspicions about the company, but it feels like she's already in her head, like, what's going on here?
There's a scene.
Yeah. So in that way, it doesn't feel
arguing. If I was arguing with myself on the whole knowledge isn't a character arc thing, that maybe you could argue that her learning about the corruption will forever change her personality in the future. But I don't know if that shows up completely on screen ever in this movie. In the context of this film, like knowledge like that's like her a year from now. That might change the character. It's
that's true. That's true. That's Ripley and Aliens. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know if that counts for me.
Okay. Yeah, it doesn't there's enough counterpoints for me to go like, nah. And Jamie, before you go with yours, I just wanted to say what Blake Snyder said, which he said her arc is loner to hero, which I don't think that's true. I don't think she's a loner. Don't think she's a loner. I just think,
and even if she is a loner, she's a hero for by herself. So she's a loner hero. I don't know.
It's a crew filled with loners.
Yeah. So they're all sorry. Don't agree with him there. Yeah. What were you gonna say, Jamie?
Well, his theme as well. We mentioned that earlier. It's something like, "What is being human?" or something. And I don't.
Yeah, really I don't buy that either.
I don't buy it. Yeah. So I didn't really detect an arc. Ripley is kind of a perfect character in this, and it's almost like, you know, you get that complaint leveled against female characters these days, like Ray or somebody like that kind of has the answers and doesn't have a lot of
there's a name for it, right?
Mary Sue would be the term that and Ripley kind of is that kind of character. Now, interestingly enough, you know, because sometimes sexism and stuff can come into that, especially with the name, even though that's not what the name is. Ripley, I think, if I recall, was supposed to be a male character, and they just cast
it as, and her name was Brody, by the way.
Okay. I read
like Jaws.
Oh, really?
the Rinsler had a book. I read the Rinsler Making of Alien book a couple years ago, and I sort of remember that from it. So so here's my theory on Ripley, though. I have two kind of competing theories. One is, I wonder, first of all, Sigourney Weaver's name isn't first in the credits. So I wonder if we're dealing with a kind of trick here. Like if you went and saw this movie in 1979, did you think Tom Skerritt was going to be the hero? And then he dies, and it's a rug pull.
Yeah.
And it's a little sleight of hand trick that they're doing. So they know that you know about movies. They know that you know the guy that's takes the chances and makes the bold moves and doesn't do the company line is the hero that saves the day. They know you know that. So they do a little trick and they killed him off, and they move to some other character who isn't even the most fun or interesting. You know, it could have been Yaphet Kotto or somebody, or you know, somebody else. They moved to this other character as kind of the hero because they don't want you to know. It's kind of like this is one of these horror things that I don't think is used as much in nowadays modern horror as maybe it was back then, or maybe in the independent horror, which you're in the hands of a madman. This person knows you know all the tricks, and they're not going to let you ever get comfortable. And maybe Ripley could die. Who knows? We don't know. Maybe everybody could die. And I think that's sort of what's going on here.
Like a false protagonist approach, basically like Psycho.
Excuse I'm the youngest of the three of us, but I don't remember this, but you're saying like back in the day, I know Tom Skerritt from like Alien and Top Gun, okay? So my knowledge of what he was back then is not good. Was he like a name that would be in place there? Like, is that how people would view it?
I'm just
like
saying
Tom Skerritt would be the hero of a movie back then. I'm just asking.
I just think I think the way his character is written and portrayed, he feels like a hero.
Okay. I didn't know if you meant like I didn't know if you meant like the actor is usually in movies as that bravado type of like hero character.
No, he seems kind of empathetic. He's a nice guy. He's a leader. He's got all that stuff. I think he just feels like he's the hero of the movie up until the point he dies. And he, you know, Ripley is kind of given as much screen time as almost any of the other of the ensemble. And still she's the lead, but he gets a lot more screen time because he's the leader, you know, so he's kind of got the relationship with everybody. That said, I think if I remember this movie, I don't think Sigourney Weaver is top billing back in the day. Like when they roll the credits, I don't even think she has top billing. So I think they kind of knew what they were doing. I think there's a little.
So there was some manipulation and intentional making it feel less like your prototypical character journey.
I think nowadays when people go into it, they know, oh, it's Sigourney Weaver. This is her big role. She's going to live.
Can't get away from it. Yeah.
Right.
But 1979. I think they thought Ripley would die. I think people were sitting there.
She could die.
Theater, who's going to die? I have no idea. I have no idea who's going to die. I have no idea where this movie's going.
And when Tom Skerritt is killed, it's all bets are off.
It's not a much worse movie. Executive Decision. I remember seeing that in the theaters, and when Steven Seagal dies in the first 15 minutes, and you're like, "Oh, I'm watching a Kurt Russell movie? What?" It was essentially that, just in a much worse way.
No, it is that. It's we talked about it on Scream. It's Drew Barrymore dies in the first scene.
Right.
Sure, her face the biggest on the poster.
I do think that's in my opinion, that's what's going on.
That's what's going on.
That's the thing.
I think you're right. I never thought about it that way.
I had two other theories that came up, but I don't think these are as strong as the other ones.
Gotcha.
One is I was looking at the entire crew as the character and saying, who has flaws? What do they have to overcome to survive? And it's almost like you're weeding down the crew to.
So the things that need fixing is really crew based, not an individual. Interesting.
If you look at the crew as a person, maybe there's a way to view the crew's arc, which is to her ultimate survival as the survival of the thing.
Yeah.
It was too heady for me, so I couldn't get too deep into it. And then
Ash definitely seeks invisibility. And, I think there's an argument there. If we went down to 5, you could probably make each one of them represent something else. Yeah.
It's like a different way to look at it. And then there's another thing that was the book, The Flat Arc, that we've talked about flat arcs before. They're characters that don't arc, but change.
The Arc of Awesome.
The Arc of Awesome.
Superman and Marty McFly, right?
Yeah, exactly. exactly.
Yeah.
So I think it's her book. I'm going to give I think her name's K.M. Weiland.
Okay.
I think her book talks about story versus situation, right? And she says stories have arcs, but situations don't. And she points to movies like maybe Indiana Jones or James Bond. And she says there's situations. They're these experiences we go through, but they're not stories. And I don't know how she's really defining stories,
Weird.
but whatever.
Yeah.
But a movie like this would be, so Texas Chainsaw Massacre she references, and this one's similar to that, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you have no idea who's going to die or what's going to happen. And you kind of live the experience, like not knowing exactly what's going to happen at any given second. So I think there's something to be said for that too.
While you were talking, Jamie, you made me think of the alternate universe timeline where Sam Raimi made Alien and Yaphet Kotto was like the actual like hero of the movie. You can totally see that, right? Like
that would be so
it's
awesome.
a different movie. It's a different movie, but he's the same character and he's like got that like bravado like Ash Williams thing. Totally different movie. Probably still awesome. Totally love that movie.
That's great.
Yeah.
So but ultimately what the three of us are in agreement on is that we don't think she has an arc. Right?
I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. Yeah. Okay. Wow.
And that's not bad. That's not a negative.
No, that's fine. We talked about all the reasons why she's still a great character.
But
so it just goes to show you don't have to have a character arc.
We also don't need to defend that because Ripley is a beloved, iconic character.
Right. We don't need
to. So if she has no arc, this is how you do it.
Yeah.
That's how you do it.
and I'll say this, as much as somebody I focus very deeply on arcs and flaws and themes and stuff like that. In a lot of horror movies I've worked on, because they wanted to be this in the hands of the madman, realism kind of thing. I've worked on scripts that didn't have an arc because arcs would tip the viewer off to certain things, or they tip them off to the lack, because real life doesn't always have an arc. So sometimes in horror movies, especially, you want them to be so brutally realistic that you don't want to tip the hand and like, oh, those are the things that need fixing. I knew what his arc's going to be. You have to be really cautious to hide it. Whereas like when I'm working on a family
those are the
film,
things that need fixing.
Yeah, exactly. Because every audience member is saying that. Jimmy's dad is out there pointing at it. He's like, things that need fixing.
Movies are bullshit because revelations don't happen in real time. Your revelation in real life usually comes like 2 years after a big traumatic event.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It doesn't happen in that movie. You're like, no, this is what I gotta do. Third act begins. That's not what happens.
But that's the way we wish it would be.
That's the way we wish it would be.
Movies are fantasy.
Most movies are the way we wish it would be. But there's some movies, especially horror movies, that are just grueling experiences and tension boxes.
Right.
And it's a certain type of horror movie. It's not all horror movies, because a lot of horror movies have character arcs. But this movie is one of those. I recognize, and I think it's because this movie comes from the 70s. This is like a 70s movie that like when we get to the 80s and we get to Aliens, I think that probably does have more of an arc in a traditional storytelling model. This one, it's almost like he wants to make you believe in it. It's like so much like this is real. Anything can happen. Anybody can die. It's kind of nihilistic in some ways. It's like and I think that's kind of what this movie is. And it reminds me of some of the stuff I've worked on, things like this that wanted to be like, they weren't as great as this, obviously, but wanted to be like this in some ways.
Well, okay, now let me make up for last time. Speaking of madmen, in the hands of a madman, like a guy who might have, directed Return of the Living Dead, Dan O'Bannon. He wrote a book that you guys have both talked about. Jimmy, you even sent some pages. I read them. They were great.
Yeah, they are great.
Dan O'Bannon's Dynamic Structure, I believe.
Yeah. So Dan O'Bannon has a screenwriting book for anyone listening out there who's not familiar. He has a screenwriting book called Dan O'Bannon's Guide to Screenplay Structure. And it is a long book. It's like 200 and something pages. And each chapter is sort of a technique with exercises at the end. It's very good. It's very stuffy, like, which is Jamie and I were talking about, that was very surprising. It's very professor-like in the way it's teaching. But the entire book centers around this small chapter, which succinctly he breaks down his theory of how structure works. So I thought, since we're typically talking about like the Save the Cat, and he doesn't mention the fact that, you know, there's been a structure book made after something he wrote labeled.
He doesn't mention Jamie's book in this book.
No, sadly.
So I don't have like an encyclopedic memory of this, but so I'll just break down the concept, and Jamie, if you want to interject at all or you feel like you could explain it more. But he basically says Act 1 defines the conflict, Act 2 elaborates the conflict to a point of no return, and Act 3 resolves the conflict for good or ill. And Act 1 it's really like one tiny paragraph, so I'll just read what he says. Imagine Dan O'Bannon is here teaching. We'll channel him. He says, in Act 1, we introduce the characters and, Jamie, their situation. Who, where, when, why, from this conglomerate of people, places, ideas, and desires arises an issue of contention. The principal characters and the antagonists differ on how best to deal with the issue. And as a result, a conflict emerges. The moment the conflict materializes, Act 1 is over. So in this one, it's pretty fucking clear. Like, they've got an invader in the ship, like a mysterious invader. I think the Act 1, you know, curtain is lines up exactly with how he describes, as you would imagine, since he wrote both things. So, and that's like what he's talking about is the lock-in, right? We've talked about that before, Jamie. Do you want to recap the lock-in, sort of compare?
Sure. Yeah. And it's really the moment. I mean, not to use too many theory things and mix them up, but really,
I don't want to mix them.
It's really the moment, in my opinion, like the thing you learned in high school, the dramatic question, which is, will the hero achieve the goal despite the obstacles, or will the horrible thing happen? So, and once that question is planted in your audience's mind, Act 1 is over. So I kind of agree with him. I have a different way of stating it, but it's kind of the same thing.
So it's for anyone listening, the lock-in of Alien is when the alien...
when the alien face hugs him and they bring him into the ship. Despite
really? I was going to say when the alien was like completely born.
No, that's the midpoint. In my opinion,
it's
the problem that needs fixing is this mysterious alien invader that's now in there.
Bob, your point is a good one.
I agree.
Listen, I'm only reacting to how you described it, because to me, as the audience, when that alien's released onto the ship, then you asking yourself, now what do they do? And that's why that's the only reason I said that.
I think it's a little bit semantical, but as a purist, you could easily say, after a monster is released on the ship, you know, and a murderous monster, will the heroes survive? And that is the midpoint. That's the part you're saying. That could be the lock-in. I think, and this especially happens with horror movies, especially if you have a slow burn horror movie where you save the monster to the midpoint. A lot of times, semantically, you could think of the midpoint as the end of Act 2. And that's when the story really starts. And the rest of it is the slow burn to get there. You know what I mean?
This is a slow burn.
And this is a slow burn.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of like Friday the 13th style movies where Jason really, really doesn't show up publicly until the midpoint. Like, it's game on, you know what I mean? But he's killing people up until that point. It's just like, where did Timmy go? I don't know. You know, and
they don't know that they're dealing with a danger yet. Yeah.
And that's kind of what this reminds me of as a slasher movie like that. So I think your point's a good one. I do too. Either way you want to slice it. You could slice it as they have this horrible problem, this thing attached to a face. They have an alien creature locked aboard the ship and they have to deal with it. Or you could say that the only reason I push back
is they don't know that it's completely dangerous to them yet.
They're still experimenting on it.
Yeah, right. They're like, he's the guys whose face it's on is in danger of some sort, but they don't know that they're in danger. That's only
And that's the thing about these theories is they're all kind of semantical and they're strategies to pull your story out. So either way you slice it might work for you, as a writer. It doesn't too much matter. Now, the cool thing about this movie, and it does an awesome job of this, even in the beginning, every scene, and I almost wish I did a breakdown of this, causes the next scene. It just goes,
it's
this one, then this one, then this one. It's one of the extremely fast-paced movies, even though it's slow burn. Everything keeps moving it forward, like every scene.
Yep.
There's not a moment wasted.
That's it. So unlike maybe like a Friday the 13th movie where they're just having a party and not knowing where Timmy went, this one is, they give you something else. They give you another movie to watch, which is, how do we save our friend? What is this alien? It's a mystery, whether or not that's the log line or the log line is, they must survive the monster. That's where it gets a little debatable.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about Jaws, like they don't start the face-to-face battle with the shark until the midpoint.
Right.
Like Brody and Quint and and Hooper aren't like actively trying to figure out how to fight the monster until the middle of Jaws. So in that way, it's very similar.
There comes a point in Jaws where they're like pursuing him, but they're not aware of how much danger they're actually in. They think they still got the upper hand until then it becomes, oh no, now what do? They've got no radio, the ship is taking on water. You could argue that's almost a lock-in.
Interesting.
That's almost a late lock-in, right? Like I know I'm not trying to argue this forever. I'm just saying.
No. I would so Jaws is a little different in that I would say they know a monster's out there. They know it's killing.
Yeah.
And they're trying to save people's lives.
That's
and that does happen at the end of. So I don't think that one's as slow burn.
Is it wrong to say you can have like mini lock-ins and like within scenes and stuff too, right? Like,
yeah, I don't know that I've tested that in the lab, but it's possible.
Oh, I like that phrasing. But going back to Dan O'Bannon's, I'm sorry I veered us off a little bit.
It was my fault a bit.
So no, it was a great argument. Act 1 defines the conflict, which we just started to, and so we're saying, for the sake of his example, it's when they bring the alien into the ship. What do they do now? Act 2 elaborates that conflict to a point of no return. I'll just read a little bit of this section that he says. You've no doubt heard a situation described as a comedy of errors. The setup means the Act 2 is a result of some initial folly, circumstances getting progressively complicated and difficult until events reach an extremity of ridiculousness. See how it sounds like a professor? This situation is what you're trying to achieve in all storytelling, even if you're not writing a comedy. When a conflict arises between characters, it's naturally going to lead them to do something about the conflict. That something will lead to another thing, which will lead to another thing, a causal chain of events. That's what I mean when I say Act 2 develops the consequences of the conflict. One thing piles on top of another, and the situation gets steadily more problematic until it reaches a critical mass, a point of irreversibility, where the antagonists reach the point of no return, and the freedom of choice the heroes have evaporates. So what do you think is the point of no return in this movie? There's kind of a bunch of them.
Yeah. Since they're floating in space, everything feels like that. Like just the actual circumstance itself feels like that.
I don't know, Jamie. What do you think is the point of no return in Alien?
And honestly, I'm not. I'd have to really, again, test this one in the lab to figure out what he's saying. Because there's some part of me that thinks point of no return is kind of the all is lost, break into two double punch. You know what I mean? It's like everything's been lost at the all is lost moment. Mm-hmm. And then they make an action to the only action they have to save the day, the only chance to find so I think that logically works. So to me, I'm taking it back to the stuff I know. What's the all is lost in this? What do you think the moment of that is? What does Blake do?
Yeah, I think I think it's one of three things. It's either the death of Dallas, the captain.
Yeah.
The but it could be like 1, 2, 3 punch, discovering the truth that Ripley discovers in the place by herself with the computer, that the company.
That's what I clocked.
That's what I would say.
Or you could say it's not even that, and until the conversation with Ash, where we gain full clarity about what the situation is. The company betrayed you. They don't care if you die, and this thing is undefeatable. We know it's undefeatable. That's why the company had you come pick it up.
I'd point to where Ripley shows the emotion for it.
Okay,
where she has her breakdown,
which is in by Mother. Herself, solitude.
Yeah,
talking to Mother.
Where
I think you're right, Bob.
For the audience, it emotionally says that Ripley knows that there's a point of return.
Yeah, and that we have to, and that kicks us into the third act, which he says resolves the conflict for good or ill. So I think you're right. I think that's probably it. Talking to Mother. Yeah.
Talking to Mother, realizing that the company betrayed them. So it's like, again, it's almost to ridiculousness. Like it gets worse and worse and worse.
It just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. What a great lesson of how to add layers to just your simple. There's a hunter killing.
That's
people.
right.
Yeah.
And then even Ash is a betrayer. One of the people in the group is a betrayer. And then she's like, well, there's hope. There's a way out. We'll fight it. We'll kill it. We'll get out in the escape pod or whatever they do. And that's kind of, I guess, where Act 3 kicks off.
Mm-hmm. No, that makes sense.
Okay. Well, Bob, I don't need to do. Originally, I was going to do my horror questionnaire for the xenomorph. I don't want to do all of them, but I just kind of want to do one of them. If you're cool with it, I'll take it away.
I'm fine with it. As long as it's cool, man.
By the way, this alien, that's like the jerk. It's the jerk of horror things. I don't know that there's ever been really an alien that's popped, like, oh my God, they really did create a monster. You know what I mean? Like, ever? I don't think there's anything that even remotely compares to this. In my lifetime.
As far as you mean, like the construction of it physically and like.
Yeah. I mean, every time I write a monster movie, I'm always like, okay, well, I can either go create something that looks like something that came before it, or then you get something like the kind of Cloverfield monsters that you see nowadays. They don't really do much for me.
I hate the Cloverfield design.
It's hard to be. It's hard to be.
It's
fresh.
It's hard. And I'm not even really knocking on the Cloverfield thing. It's just impossible to figure out how to create one of these monsters. In my lifetime, I only have a couple, like Freddy Krueger, Pops, some of the masked things. Pinhead, it would be
Predator
a really
Pops.
good one.
I mean, Predator.
Predator Pops.
Stan Winston was good at this. His video was great.
Yeah.
But it's like Alien is, even all the ones we just listed, Alien to me is on like a whole nother level. It's
Alien,
like the
also
greatest of all time.
Give words due. H.R. Geiger,
Yeah.
I mean, it literally is based on a true artist's work and vision was put into this monster. So that's not something you often get. You often get like a studio house doing it. In this case, they actually got an artist who has already had this visual style. So maybe that has something to do with it.
I will say, okay, I'll bring in the writing side of it then. Sure. That you guys have inspired me to want to talk about it a little more than I originally. I was planning on doing a whole thing, but okay, so let's talk about when you're writing a monster, you want to make sure that you have kill tactics that are specific to your premise and your story. So, and to the monster. So in this movie, I think we get 3 great specific kill tactics, which he hunts from the shadows, which to me is the ocean of this Jaws in space. I mean, you could argue space, but an extension of that darkness of space is just the shadows of the ship that come from the darkness of space, right? I mean, they are the dark waters of this story that the shark is hiding in, are the shadows of the ship. And I think that's a great instructive thing in premise delivery. They put some Jaws, they put some space paint on it, and you get the shadows of space. The second one, he always hunts from above, which I love. Like that specifically, we as an audience are looking for him to drop down after the first kill, and he consistently does kind of almost always drop down from above. So that's like a very specific thing. My third one, and this is my favorite one, is he hunts them in the air ducts. Like you can't stop that. You can't turn the air ducts off. Like, you can't, they're closing individuals, but that's not something you can control, right? Like, if they turn off the air ducts and just completely shut them in, then they can't breathe. So it's a great like use of like how's my monster hunting my characters. Also, like, well, in this case, it's like,
I was gonna say like I don't know if you can't hurt this thing. If you hurt it, its blood will literally melt you. So
right, like, that's I have that on the weapons. That's the next.
Is that a weapons
he's got
thing?
acid. Okay. Yeah, he's got acid blood. I think that's a weapon, man. Yeah, like that is a weapon. Like he perfectly evolves. And Dan O'Bannon found that in nature. I can't remember what that was. It was I wish I had the anecdote. It was one of those great moments in writing research, right? Like you're researching things. How can I like make something that like is cool? Like, let me try to get inspired by something that exists already in nature. And in this case, like the two most famous things about the alien are both found in nature. The acid blood and the double jaw is actually inspired by an eel. There's an eel called the moray eel. So he's got two things that like they hit us on a primal level because they're real, and they're both like extremely specific, and we've never seen them before. So I love both of those, the double jaw and the acid blood. And then this is one of my favorite things the movie does. The warning signs of the killer. We've talked about this in other episodes, like in Jurassic Park, it's the rippling water, and the cup. I call these, to make them simple, what are your shark fins? Like when you're coming up with a monster, get on that whiteboard and come up with as many shark fins as you can that tell the audience the monster is there, even when we don't see them.
The funny thing is their motion detector in this, right?
Yeah.
And again, I pushed that. In my head, I thought that was something that was only in Aliens, not in this. I don't know why. But the funny thing was the sound of it went like this. It went boop, 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 boop. It was Jaws. I was like,
that's awesome.
I was like, what is this?
I didn't notice that.
It's a less melodic
awesome.
Jaws.
Yeah, it was like a very flat Jaws. It was
totally on purpose.
I was like,
totally on purpose. It taps into that. That's awesome. But like, I think this movie has 5 warning signs, and they use them interchangeably. It has the darkness. Every time the shadows are around, just like the mirror and Candyman, every time the shadows are around, you feel like the alien could be there. And that's writing. That is like the shed skin. So like it's shedded skin. You're like, oh shit, it's right around the corner. The slime. There's multiple moments where there's just slime on screen, somebody finding slime. And so we know that's a shark fin. Like, we know that the alien's right around the corner, even though we don't see the alien on screen. It creates dread.
But the slime can also be there without the alien, too, making it even more confusing and scary, right?
I know. Yeah. It's so good. It's perfect. It's dual meaning. Jonesy. Every time Jonesy is scared, which this movie uses over and over to create dread for us, we know that he's looking at he knows the alien is right. He sees something that we can't see, and we're scared that the alien's about to pop out. And then Jamie, like you said, the tracking device. So we got 5 warning signs, and that kind of, informs like how you're always feeling dread. It's not just about the aesthetics. It's not just about the music. It's about the actual writing of these things. They did the whiteboard. How many ways can we make it feel like the alien is there when the audience isn't seeing him? So
and use your surroundings. It's a futuristic spaceship. Come up with that,
All right. What are all the ways exactly?
If it was an alien in a 1900s mansion, then you come up with different ways that you would see it, right? Like
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I wanted to do real quick. I went ahead and if you guys want, I did the reverse rooting resume for the Xenomorph, and I think this kind of like seals the deal as to why it's like one of the greatest monsters ever, like the GOAT. Because normally we've been showing like how Gremlins have a rooting resume, and some of them are the things we like about characters, right? And then we did it for Ghostface, and Ghostface also had some things we actually like about characters, like some of the fun stuff, right? This one, it's all reverse.
It's
so
100%.
like it's every single category. It's the reverse.
It's like
so
inhuman hunting machine. It's just like
right. It perfectly put. They're number one. They're underdogs. Never. He has the advantage from start to finish, and we're putting a gender on him. We'll just say the xenomorph has the advantage the entire time. Number two, they care about someone, or the xenomorph, as Ash says, is unclouded by conscious remorse or delusions of morality. So it doesn't care about anything.
One of the most genius scenes in Alien 4 is when the other aliens kill the one alien to melt through the bottom of the cage. They don't give a fuck, man. They don't give a fuck. They'll do anything.
Yes. Does not care about anyone.
Yeah.
Number three, this one is not the reverse. They try very hard to make their lives better. He's the survivor, right? The xenomorph is the survivor. Number four, they're fun. I don't think that I think the alien is deadly serious, and the lack of personality whatsoever is what's scary. They're like the xenomorph's like Michael Myers, like, just a blank slate,
even
like nothing.
So.
Even
he's
less
not even
so,
a human.
Right?
He's like not. At least Michael Myers looks like a human.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Michael Myers has a good sense of humor too at times. Like,
so in the later movies,
dry.
yes,
it's extremely dry.
In the later movie,
very British sense of humor.
Number five, we know their struggle. It's the reverse. We know nothing about the xenomorph whatsoever. And that lack of knowledge whatsoever about the villain is very scary.
Right.
And number six, this one's interesting because it's not really like, we wish we were more like them. We definitely would never want to be like the xenomorph, but it checks off a lot of these things. Resourceful, yes. Smartest person in the room, yes. Never gives up, yes. Cuts through the BS, yes. All those things track for the xenomorph.
Is an apex predator, yes.
Apex predator,
We are not that as humans.
Yeah. No. And to your point, Bob, number seven, they're just like us. No, they're by definition alien. Number eight, they're the best at something. I mean, it's the best at hunting and killing. So I think once again, Jamie, you can take your rooting resume and use it, reverse it at the right times to make a very compelling villain, just the same way that you could make a very compelling hero. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Before we get to our last point, I just feel like this section made me think of something that I would recommend to anyone, even you guys. If you haven't seen Jodorowsky's Dune, I would recommend anyone listening watch that documentary. I love it. It's just
I love it too.
Listening to him talk is incredible. But we're talking about the construction of the alien, and we've talked about Dan O'Bannon. The team that made Alien was largely comprised of the team he brought together to make his version of Dune. So just as a little if you want to see kind of the prequel making of Alien, watch Jodorowsky's Dune. It's a great little
I forgot that. I forgot that connective tissue between the two things.
Dan O'Bannon and H.R. Geiger came together to make that movie, which never happened, and then Alien happened. So, he kind of brought the pieces together, and you know what I mean? There's some DNA of Jodorowsky's influence there. So
for sure.
Just wanted to recommend.
And you can probably imagine how they got to these answers, right? How they had these discussions and the construction of the monster and things like that. I mean, this is definitely craft, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.
This is craft. This is writing. This was done before the script was made flawless.
You don't need the plot to do that stuff almost.
Yeah, that stuff is really important to the process. And I read scripts, tons of horror scripts from people who are trying to learn how to do this, and they don't take the time to do this, so their monsters aren't memorable.
Right.
So, yeah.
Last but not least, something I think we've discussed many times: praise of killer speeches. Right?
Yes. This is one of the best.
This episode is also making me think of Jaws. For as much as we've said all the Jaws influence, right?
Yes. Yes. We're gonna get there.
Praise a killer. The first movie I think about.
The Quint, Indianapolis.
Yeah, the Indianapolis.
It's the speech. So this is something I took a Robert McKee seminar 20 years ago, and he just coined this. It's the idea that one way to make your audience fear the monster, and it sort of adds some sizzle to it, and gives the monster gravitas that like it already has, but you just have all this monologue about how scary they are and how powerful they are, and we feel it even more so. And usually this is given by the half man character, right? Usually the half man is warning based on their experience, but not always. An example that he gave in the course that I took is that there are 3 praise of the killer speeches in Silence of the Lambs before we ever meet Hannibal Lecter. So we have 3 Indianapolis monologues about how messed up and scary and threatening and dangerous Hannibal Lecter is, and we haven't even met him yet. So you as an audience, it creates tension, like, I have to meet this character. And then when you meet him, you have all this context already, you know, and now you meet the person. So you meet the monster. So it's the Loomis, Michael Myers, you know, monologue. I met him 15 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And I spent the next 30 years trying to keep him locked up. And it's Kyle Reese in Terminator saying, like, he will not stop ever until you're dead, you know? And in this one, this is like one of my favorites. Like, it's Ash saying, okay, so here's the praise. It's kind of a conversation more, praise of the killer. It's Ripley says, how do we kill it, Ash? There's got to be a way of killing it. And he says, you can't. And he says, you still don't understand what you're dealing with, do you? It's the perfect organism. Its structural perfection is matched only by its hostility. I admire its purity, a survivor, unclouded by conscience, remorse, or delusions of morality. So if you're writing a horror movie and you don't have a praise of the killer speech, study this, look at Jaws, look at Terminator, look at Halloween, look at your favorite monster movies and see if there's a monologue about why this monster is so powerful and scary, and use it as inspiration. Add it into your give us a praise of the killer speech to add a little sizzle to the monster. I think it's really impactful.
I'm not one to usually talk about lessons on this show, but I would say if I was doing this, and I have done this in the past, I would imagine in my mind the version of the trailer that uses the soundbite to sell the movie, and that's how I would probably write it. What would I want to hear in the trailer about the villain? And you imagine, you know, all showing the B-roll over the dialogue of Michael, whatever.
Well,
you know?
I was just going to say that just hearing it this time, I thought of something like Jimmy and I are always trying to come up with exercises for like premise delivery and stuff like that. There might be an exercise where you, when you're conceiving of your story, you just write your own praise of the killer speech. You'd be like, what would somebody say? You know, it might just be one of these writing prompts. Like, what would somebody say that had faced off with the monster in the past or respects the monster to kind of warn your heroes about what they're about to face?
And it's not just, it works in other genres too.
It does.
It works in comedies. In Raiders of the Lost Ark episode, there's 2 praises of killer speeches for the Ark of the Covenant, which is why the only context you get to its power and might are these praise of the killer speeches for the Ark itself. So it works for things like that too. So if your whole story is based on a MacGuffin, you could give a praise of the killer speech to the MacGuffin.
You could almost argue like it's something like Tommy Boy. It's David Spade screaming at Tommy for how lazy he's been his whole life and how much of a screw up he is.
Because he's his own monster.
He's his own monster. In Tommy Boy is his own stupidity and laziness, and so David Spade like lays it out.
Yay, that's good.
That's why I think the vague expansion of it that we should take and coin our own term is hype man. Like
hype man.
The
hype man.
Yeah,
yes, Jamie, because then it doesn't sound like it's horror specific.
Exactly.
Because when I try to use this as a teaching term for non-horror genres, it gets a little confusing because it's quote unquote praise of the killer, but like nobody's getting killed in a comedy. So hype man, hype woman is good because there's actually a praise of the villain speech in Bridesmaids. So there's a hype woman for Rose. Is it Rose Byrne? For Rose I can't remember her last name. The villain in Bridesmaids. There's a praise of the villain speech against her. So the hype, that's her name. Rose Byrne. So there's a hype woman speech for Rose Byrne in Bridesmaids. So I mean, maybe from now on we'll nix this and we'll expand its definition and use.
I feel like we've always said though all the horror terms that you guys come up with, it can be expanded to all the genres. It's just
they work with all the genres. They're just specialized.
I would hope any writer would realize that.
Yeah.
it's
sometimes
almost,
you got to make it clear that you got to specify that.
yeah, and just to brainstorm it in front of everybody that are millions of listeners.
Yeah.
I
Sure wish everybody would download the shit. Yeah.
Hey, man, all 183. Yes.
To narrow it down, maybe it's like hype the problem or something like that, you know? Hype the conflict.
I can think of so many right off the top.
Antagonist hype man. It doesn't sound as fun, but
yeah, it's not as fun. Yeah. We'll figure it out, and the next time we'll come with it. We got a new term. We got a new codified.
I'll say this though: Praise of the Killer is kind of cool sounding. It is like I do like
good
it.
for Robert McKee.
Yeah, I do like that. Well, that brings us to the end of Alien, right, guys? I
wanted to say I skipped so many, but like if you're interested in doing your own like extra work on this, it's got so many things we didn't talk about, like such great craft. There's like amazing foreshadowing in this movie, like you look dead, like there's like at least 10 moments of amazing foreshadowing. There's like 5 ticking clock mechanisms that are really instructive in this story. There's a great 5-point finale, which we didn't talk about. There's comic obsessions with Parker, like in the bonuses, like it's hysterical. Like every time, why don't we get back to the bonuses? Like, so anyway, it's just,
I think part of it is that this is such a simple movie, but it's like
it's dense.
It's taking this simple movie and just applying like layers and layers and layers of craft on top of it. You know?
Do you guys think that's why you got some people that come to this late in life and then they don't understand because it's
just so a slasher movie.
It's so egregiously simple. Right. And the simplicity is the brilliance.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. Last night, Jill watched it for me, my wife, and she's never seen it. And you know, she was like, and she's a sci-fi fanatic. And she was like, yeah, from a sci-fi standpoint, I thought it was really well done. And I thought it was a really good movie and very entertaining, but I don't understand why it's hailed as a classic. Because she, you know, it's 2022 and she's coming to it now. So, and she was like, it's just so simple. She even used that phrase, like, it's just so simple. So like, yeah,
it's like reputation precedes it to be something extremely complex.
Yeah. So just to your point is what I was saying, Bob. Also,
Ridley Scott has not helped this at all by making Prometheus, which is the literal opposite. And we're not reviewing Prometheus, but I mean, as far as like,
we could have a whole side conversation about Ridley
Prometheus
himself.
Right? But you know what I mean? Like, Prometheus is not simple in any shape or form. It is trying to hit themes that have nothing to do with all this. It's just a complete. He himself went in the opposite direction, so I can't blame people who are come to it like, I watched Prometheus first, and why this, and then what does this have to do with the reason humanity exists?
You know, as a kid who grew up before this movie came out and was seeking out science fiction, it also did a lot of the things we take now for granted, craft wise, especially like just production design, just the idea of truckers in space. I mean, that was almost like something,
collar workers.
It's starkly different from the greatest probably classic before this. I mean, other than Star Wars, which is kind of fantasy, which also did a lot of these things that moved this stuff forward, which was 2001. And if you kind of just compare the two and say, well, 2001 was the height of science fiction filmmaking and what you did with it. And then this movie came, not that this compares to that in any way. I mean, they're different movies, but you can see the evolution of it. You can also see the difference of the two, you know.
I also think it might suffer from like a Godfather syndrome for some people. Like people will, I have friends who like have went back and watched The Godfather and been like, dude, it was cliche. And I'm like, no. It started the cliche. It
created the tropes.
But I have to be sympathetic to the fact that it's literally 40 years later. They've been watching mob movies their whole life. You know what I mean? So somebody...
the distress signal on the planet. I'm sure that was in Star Trek episodes. Right. But like that is something that has been the setup for like so many TV shows and comic books and movies since in 40 years since. So you see it here and it's like, well, you have no context, like, oh yeah, like this was one of the first to dramatize that. Right. So
you can't they couldn't make John Carter of Mars successful now because everything
created
stole from it, and then you made a movie of it, and everyone's like, "This is kind of bland, dude." Like, you didn't even try. Yeah.
Yeah, they would have had to change all the source material in order for it to work, to be fresh. Yeah, and take away anything that it did to create its fame. And
I think Robert Eggers' John Carter of Mars is what we're waiting for.
Oh gosh,
it would be unique. You can definitely say that.
Yes,
I can't wait to see the Northman. So, I think that's everything.
That's it.
We don't need to plug anything because Jamie plugged his book, right? Unless you have anything to plug, Jimmy.
Got nothing.
Oh, Comedy of Horrors, Volume 1.
Oh, yeah.
Now on wherever you like to pick up your on-demand stuff, and it's cheap on Amazon. It's like you can get it for $3.99 as a rental, or $8.99.
And you directed a segment in that, Jamie?
I directed a segment. Fun with Ferkley.
Right? You wrote
no,
it too.
I just directed.
You just directed it. Okay.
Yes, I did. Yes,
no writing on this.
So if you just want to see Jamie be a director, solely.
That's right. That's right. Save the Cat directs for TV.
Directs for TV. Right. And I'm gonna say, don't forget that everything is up on YouTube too. And second, if you want to support the show, I promise. Some people have yelled at me about this. I will start a Patreon. But if you want to support the show or Thundergrunt itself, right now, go to my Twitter and go to the links and buy a T-shirt or something. That's what I got up right now. I promise I'll get a Patreon going so that you can support it. I'm happy that I know at least like 2 people who will do it.
Hey, that's awesome.
You can help me pay for the hosting and just my time. So I'd appreciate it. If that's everything, thanks for listening, right?
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
You have just listened to Writers Blockbusters, a screenwriting podcast featuring 2 professionals and another guy. Available only on Thundergrunt.